Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence, I swear to you, that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, two underscores, A-N-T. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. Follow me on the old TikTok as well. Same exact handle, pro, two underscores, A-N-T. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we will be diving into Buffalo Bills Mandatory Minicamp, a interesting affair this week with press conference gems and some more practice ramp up and full attendance from all the Buffalo Bills, including Jordan Poyer, who, I know there's some rumblings and some rumors about him potentially not showing up or showing up and not practicing, but he did practice, and we will touch on that. We're going to dive into, similar to what we've done the past several weeks when it's come to the Buffalo Bills OTA series here on this show. We are going to dive into player press conferences, coaching press conferences. What's up, Vito? Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you, my man. How you doing? We're going to dive into player press conferences. We are going to dive into the coaching press conferences, some practice notes. Jason gets it. The only podcast with a Christmas tree. That's right. All year round. Jason, you get me. You understand. That's why we're here. I only do this show so I can have the tree. Everything else is secondary. The football, the film, the analytics, the metrics, the schemes, the X's and O's talk, the chalkboard stuff. It's all secondary. It doesn't matter. Everything's about the tree. Exactly. And Jason, and you get it. Both Jasons are in alignment. It's all about the tree. You guys get it. It's all about, the foliage, all that kind of stuff. You guys get it. This is just a medium for me to showcase the tree. But in tonight's episode, much like the last several weeks where we've dove into OTAs, there's a lot of fluff and propaganda coming out in this time of the offseason. I love all the support for the tree. I like how Jim is like, he's waiting for the July tree. You're in for a treat. The July tree is going to be special. I'd really love a way. It's horribly unsafe and wouldn't work. I'd love a way to be able to do sparklers or some kind of firework action for the tree. Probably not logical or probable, but go big or go home. So we'll see what happens there. But, nice from Ralph, from tray to tree. Well done. We've gone horribly off the rails already in the beginning of this show because of the tree, but it's okay because I appreciate your support for the year-round Christmas tree, what it means, what it symbolizes. You guys get me. We're right here. I appreciate you very much. But yeah, like we've dove into the last several weeks, there's a lot to sift through when it comes to OTAs and minicamp and all that stuff. You got guys who are, introducing themselves to the media and the fan base for the first time. So you've got some coach speak, you've got some generalities, you've got coaches who are in new positions for the first time. You've got some coaches like Sean McDermott who are naturally cagey and don't like to really tip their hand and talk about, what's going on, and they like to keep things close to the vest. And then you've got certain players and coaches who are more open. And then you've actually got practice, but you've got practice against air. You've got different levels of competition. There's no pads. There's no physicality. There's a whole lot to sift through and dissect. But some people try to pass off OTAs and minicamp as just complete fluff and complete propaganda, and like there's no value to it. And I really think there is. When you really study what's happening day after day, when you're really listening and transcribing the press conferences and the interviews and watching what's going on in the practices, you start to piece together a real semblance of what is going to happen and transpire throughout this offseason, what is going to happen and transpire throughout the 2022 season initially, without all the random variables that an NFL season presents and brings. But you really start to get to the ability to piece some things together. And also just from a pure value standpoint, the work that you get done in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, you're not practicing against other players. You're not really going hard. You're going up against air. But these mental reps and these chances to build muscle memory and reflexes and to build the technique and the foundation to the point where when it comes time to put the pads on and strap the helmets on, whether in training camp or preseason or the regular season, the work that you do in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, it sets the foundation for what you do. You don't want to continuously having to be thinking about your technique and hand placement and footwork and assignment and all that stuff when it comes time to put the pads on. You want to be reading and reacting in the moment, regardless of what side of the ball you're on, regardless of what position that you play. So these OTAs and mandatory minicamps are actually important because those reps, those mental reps, those physical reps against no one where you're just competing against air and blades of grass, those build up the mental side of your game, and they build up that muscle memory that allows you to build that foundation for which you can build upon and succeed when it comes time to actually get physical and actually compete against other players and other teams. So there's a lot to go through from mandatory minicamp from, these past couple of days. There's supposed to be another day of mandatory minicamp tomorrow, Thursday, the 16th, but the Bills canceled it. So we just have 2 days, which is fantastic. So we get to recap both days and all the interviews and practice stuff and everything that came through. And we're going to do that in tonight's episode. Also, what we're going to do in tonight's episode, as you guys know, I love the live viewership. I love the engagement. We've already seen a bunch of it, and I see more comments coming through that I'm going to pull up in a minute. But if you're here joining me live, one, thank you very much for stopping by. Two, any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, philosophies, ideologies, theorems, maxims, anything and everything you got, put it in the chat. I love seeing the engagement and the interaction between all the live viewers, but I also like to pull up as many of the comments as I can. I like engaging with everybody who's stopping by to join me so that I'm not alone on these shows. So I appreciate you guys and girls, and anything you got, throw it up into the chat. I try to get to everything. And of course, super chats get priority because one, I respect the donation, but two, like I always say, the color, because I've got notes, I've got my screen kind of like split halfway. When you throw up a super chat, the color immediately catches my eyes and I get that flash. So that gets priority. It'll guarantee your comment gets pulled up and I'll answer whatever you got. But yeah, and I appreciate everybody stopping by. I also like some of the suggestions. So I mentioned the fireworks and sparklers for the July decoration for the Christmas tree. I like some of the suggestions here. Jim says that LED lights are safe. Tommy comes through. Tommy, I see you all the time on Twitter. I appreciate you. Tommy says fiber optic lights can give you the fireworks effect for your tree. I am timestamping this episode right now in my brain, and I'm going to make a note of that. The wife and I are probably going to do some shopping then for some fiber optic lights. I really like the idea that we've kind of collaborated on here in this episode with the live chat of trying to get some sort of firework action or some kind of firework aesthetic for the tree come July. So I appreciate you, Tommy. If anybody's watching this and you've done these fiber optic setups and you got a good brand recommendation, throw it up in the chat. I would definitely, be down for that. Jowl, what's up, my man? Tremendous supporter of the show. He says, I hope Spencer Brown gets healthy by training camp. I do as well. Sean McDermott spoke. That's funny for Jowl. Super chats go to the tree. Jowl, 2 comments Spencer Brown related. He says, I hope Spencer Brown gets healthy by training camp. And then the next one is, do you think Brown takes a step back due to missing time? Oh, I haven't even really thought about it at this point, but I'm thinking about it now because you asked it. I don't want to say step back, but anytime you're not on the field, it's hurting you, even if you're the most experienced and the most veteran guy, right? But especially somebody in Spencer Brown's case, who we know last year, if things had worked out the way they should have going into 2021, Spencer Brown was not supposed to see as much action last year as he did. He did see the action that he saw because the Bills were deficient on the offensive line in several areas. So he got thrust into action earlier than he was supposed to. He was supposed to have more of a sitting learning year last year. He was supposed to be that 6th offensive lineman last year in those sets, not Tommy Doyle. It was supposed to be Spencer Brown. So he got thrust into action early. And yeah, it would have been awesome if this entire offseason he was getting every single rep at OTAs, at minicamp, anything and everything, because with how green and how raw he is, when you couple that with the athleticism and the size and speed and the strength and everything that he possesses, which are his biggest strengths and his calling card at this point, you want to be able to tie the experience and the complexities of the game to that talent level. You want him to be able to feel confident in his assignment, in his responsibilities, in his technique, especially with the new offensive line coach and Aaron Cromer. So I don't want to say step back, but I will definitely say like him missing time is a hindrance. How big of a hindrance it is, we'll find out come the season, but it's definitely not helping him to miss the time. We'll see how much it, quote unquote hurts him. So I wouldn't use the words like step back, but it's definitely not going to push him as far along in his development this offseason as it would be if, obviously he was practicing and getting all those reps, working against Von Miller, working against Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epenesa and Boogie Basham and all those guys. And again, continuing to build those mental reps and having those reps against air where you start to build your foundation. you start to build that muscle memory and really start to lay the groundwork for your technique so you can build upon that as you move throughout the rest of the offseason. So he's a little behind. Hopefully he's good to go come training camp, and we really get to see him, take hold and take root in this offense. Tommy's saying, I'm the AV guy that you need. I appreciate you, Tommy. You got my back. Another comment here from Tommy. Tommy says, I hope we have a more aggressive defense this year. It's funny in thinking about what the defense is going to be this year. I wonder. We know and I don't even think this is just unique to Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier. You want to get as much pressure as possible as a defense without having to use too many bodies. So in a perfect world, if you could get, I guess in a completely perfect world, if you could get pressure with like one guy and drop 10, you'd be, living in heaven. But if you can get pressure with 3 or 4 more realistically, and you can drop 7, that is ideal. You can play so many more coverage games on the back end when you drop 7, or if you can show 2 high safety looks and mix them in with single high. If you can do different things pre-snap and post-snap, there is so much more available to you in order to confuse the offense, play games, disguise looks, disguise coverage, and really, take advantage of having as many guys as possible in coverage. But what the Bills have done the last several years, they've mixed in, simulated pressures, creeper pressures. They have blitz from time to time. But traditionally, they've been a 4-man rush team. I think that's going to continue, especially with the addition of Von Miller. You would hope that with the jump in his game that Ed Oliver made last year, adding someone of Von Miller's ilk to the defensive line, I would hope the Bills don't have to blitz too much. I would love it if the Bills can just rush 4 and be good with Von Miller and Ed Oliver, and then somebody else takes a jump from a pass rush productivity standpoint, like we've continued to talk about the show, whether it's Gregory Rousseau, whether it's AJ Epenesa, whether it's Carlos Basham, whoever. If you can just get someone to make that jump to go along with a premier rusher and Von Miller, and someone who's on the, I don't want to say Ed Oliver's on the cusp of being a premier rusher from the interior, but he had a very, very strong year last year. I think a sneaky good year that people don't really realize because the raw stats and sack metrics and sack numbers weren't there. But when you watch the tape, he was a consistent force, whether in the run game, whether in the pass game. We're going to talk about him a little later in this episode. But yeah, I'm very interested to see what the defense is this year and how they operate given the addition of Von Miller. The Bills have never, as a defense under Sean McDermott, they've never had a premier guy up front. I think Jerry Hughes, his production has dipped the last several years, but I think he's been a bit underrated by fans, or at least, a certain subset of Bills Mafia. And the other signings that they've had and draft picks haven't panned out really to, I think, the level that they necessarily wanted or the money commanded. We've never seen a premier pass rusher on this Bills team under Sean McDermott. So I wonder if it leads to more just straight 4-man rushes, if it leads to more 2-man games with a 4-man rush. How many blitzes do they bring? What type of creepers or simulated pressures do they bring? All that kind of stuff. So I am very interested to see what type of aggression we see for that defense. Jowl with a comment here. Will Von Miller be a more impactful D-line coach than Eric Washington for the young guys? Very funny question. And it leads into one of the topics that we're going to go into in tonight's episode. Dad of a Bills fan says a lot of one-on-one opportunities going to be there for the rest of the D-line. Most definitely. Starts with Ed Oliver and then trickles down to Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Carlos Basham, Tim Settle, Daquan Jones, whoever's in on those pass rushing situations, whether on early downs or on third down. Yeah, there are going to be one-on-one situations because teams are going to have to double team Von. And if they're not double teaming Von, then they're leaving Von Miller one-on-one. And no team really wants to do that. Even with where he is at his age, he's still a premier guy at a premier position. So yeah, teams are going to be forced into some positions that they're really going to have to sacrifice resources in order to, maintain up front against this Bills defensive line. And the first topic that I wanted to get into on tonight's episode, maybe somewhat of a quick one, depending on how many, thoughts we got coming through from the chat. I want to talk about the importance of Sean McDermott in relation to Von Miller because of some very poignant things that Von Miller said in his presser. I see your question there, Jim. I will get to it when we talk about some defensive line a little later in this episode. Good question. Also, Jason, I see your comment as well. We're going to get to that. After the loss to the Chiefs this past offseason, much like the loss to the Chiefs in the prior season, but a little more so this year. There were a lot of cries for Sean McDermott's head, for the firing of Sean McDermott. And I understand from the emotions of it. Emotions and tensions were running high after that Chiefs loss. The whole 13 seconds. Why didn't you pooch kick it or squib kick it? How could you play, such soft coverage when the Chiefs were on the field? Yada, yada. Similar to what it was the year before. You're too conservative and, this call and that call, and everybody just dissecting every little thing because of the loss, because fans want this team to succeed so badly. And when they don't succeed and when they lose and when they fail, it's easy. The easiest thing to do is find an outlet for your anger and vent. And usually it's on one group or one individual person. And Sean McDermott bore the brunt, and the defense as well. But Sean McDermott really bore the brunt of Bills Mafia's frustration when this season ended. And we saw a decent amount of people, coming out and, pushing for the firing of Sean McDermott. And that was something that I was never on board for, just because we've really seen this organization go from coach to coach and GM as well. Just the amount of turnover at the leadership position for the Buffalo Bills has been tremendous. From, I don't want to go through and name everybody, but the Rex Ryans and the Dick Durans and the Chan Galeys and the Marones and everybody, after and before and in between. There's just been a lack of sustainability and consistency at the leadership position. And you saw that affect the roster, affect players' views of Buffalo and what type of free agents were going to come or what kind of top dollar you had to pay to average to above average level free agents. The Bills used to be in a Jacksonville Jaguars scenario where in order to get someone of Christian Kirk's caliber, you have to overpay and pay through the nose. You got to pay 4 years, $72 million with over 30-something million guaranteed to get a B plus at best wide receiver to come to your team, right? That's where the Bills used to be. The Bills are no longer that. And a large part of that is because of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. And, that doesn't give Sean McDermott an excuse for any error that he made, including the 13 seconds, including everything the year before. But no coach is perfect. No coach, literally. For as lauded as Andy Reid is now, is this genius and working with Patrick Mahomes and what the Chiefs have become. Go and read the articles about Andy Reid when he was in Philadelphia and after he left Philadelphia and went to Kansas City, and then Kansas City kept losing in the playoffs under Andy Reid. And it was the same thing. Andy Reid shouldn't be a head coach. He can't win playoff games. He can't win the big ones, so on and so forth. Like, you're going to continue to get that. Nobody is perfect. Coach, player, anything. No one. Jason says it goes here. In my opinion, that 13 seconds abysmal result was coaching. That was scared defensive play calling. But you don't fire the guy that turned the franchise around. Correct. The Bills have quality steering the ship in Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. And something that I loved from Von Miller, I wasn't expecting to hear anything about Sean McDermott from Von Miller in his presser this week at Mandatory Minicamp. I put this video out earlier on Twitter, but I really wanted to address it right off the bat on the show. I wanted to talk about some other things and players and different schemes and expectations, but I wanted to leave this because of just the impact and the power of what Von Miller said. So Von Miller this week in Mandatory Minicamp in his presser, he said, honestly, so this is a quote, direct quote. He said, honestly, my very first conversation with Coach McDermott, it was one that made me come here. Right when I flew here, I was still on the fence about coming to Buffalo. But when I talked to Coach McDermott, I just felt his authenticity. I felt that he was genuine. I felt that he was real. And I felt like that was a coach I want to play for. There are a multitude of things that brought Von Miller to the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen, the rest of the components on the defense and on the offense, how good of a team they are holistically. I'm sure Leslie Frazier. I'm sure Brandon Beane. I'm sure the money. We also know from a legacy aspect, Von Miller talked multiple times in his presser this week about legacy, and he wants to be that guy who's known as winning 3 Super Bowls with 3 separate teams. And he talked about the Bills franchise and the success they've had, but their inability to bring home a Super Bowl, and how he wants to be that drop that kind of overflows the cup to bring a Super Bowl to Buffalo, and how it's a win-win for him and the fans and the organization. He wants to win a Super Bowl. He wants to enhance his legacy. He wants more sacks. He wants to bring a championship to Buffalo for the franchise, but also, like he said, he was very honest, selfishly for himself, so that can enhance his legacy. Again, if he's the straw or the tipping point that brings a Super Bowl to Buffalo, goodness gracious, He's already a Hall of Famer, but he goes down as potentially an NFL legend. He continues to increase his sack numbers. Also, if he's a guy, again, I think would be the only player ever with 3 Super Bowls with 3 different teams. All of these accolades that he wants to add to his resume, right? And see, Jowl says, for $120 million, he'd play for Rex Ryan. Maybe, but with what Von said in the presser, he talked multiple times about he still wants to win a championship. He said, I could have stayed in LA and just took it easy and retired, and just played out there with Aaron Donald. I had it good out there. He chose to come to Buffalo for his legacy. And it's not just for the money. He came here for production, and he came here, again, maybe selfishly, depending on how you want to look at it. Von Miller came here, so if the Bills win a Super Bowl, one of the big stories is Von Miller helped lead the Buffalo Bills to a Super Bowl. He knows what that'll do for his legacy in the annals and history of the NFL if he is one of, if not the tipping point that brought a Super Bowl to a tortured franchise and tortured fan base, right? And then at the same time, again, he gets to be the dude, 3 Super Bowls, 1 with each team, right? 3 separate teams, Denver, Los Angeles, and the Buffalo Bills. And he elaborating on and speaking about how he said, I was on the fence right when I flew here, but when I talked to Coach McDermott, I just felt his authenticity. Part of the reason why Buffalo is a destination, it's Josh Allen. It's definitely Josh Allen. There's a large part of Josh Allen. It's Stephon Diggs and how he changed himself and his game when he came here and how positive he talks about Buffalo. But a large part is Sean McDermott. That's part of the importance of Sean McDermott, why I wanted to lead with this topic. You are getting players. That's funny from why for $120 million, he played for Meg Ryan. That's very funny. Sean McDermott has been at the forefront of this culture change of this organization. Yes, the players are tremendously important, but the reason players are willing to come here is because of the winning culture and the other things that Von Miller said, the authenticity, the realness, the genuine nature of Sean McDermott in this team. That's a huge part of why Von Miller came. Von Miller, he didn't have to say that at all, especially if everybody wants to say well, of course he's going to say that. He did not have to say that. He easily could have come in and be like, well, I thought Buffalo was a great fit. I was excited to play with Josh. Why not? I like snow. Ha, ha, ha. He could have played the general coach speak game or the generalities game or just, and you saw that from a lot of guys this week, right? And last week, all throughout OTAs. You have some guys who are very forthcoming and, speak from the heart or, peel back the curtain a little bit. And then you've got others, coaches and players, who just speak the generalities and say oh, hey, so-and-so, what are you working on? You've got guys like Gregory Rousseau who answer and say, I want to work on my counters, my secondary moves. I want to be able to set things up in the first quarter that I can come back to in crunch time and win. And then you've got other players like Tremaine Edmonds who just, no matter what you ask, are just like, yeah, getting better. Oh, what specifically did you focus on? Just getting better. And so you've got guys who speak in generalities. And even with some of the specificity, there's levels and there's layers to it. Von Miller coming out and saying that right then and there, that right when I flew here, I was still on the fence about coming to Buffalo. But when I talked to Coach McDermott, I just felt his authenticity. I felt that he was genuine. I felt that he was real. And I felt like that was a coach I want to play for. And again, he led with it saying, honestly, my very first conversation with Coach McDermott, it was one that made me come here. Sean McDermott was the tipping point for Von Miller. And I'm sure Sean McDermott has been a large recruiting piece for this Buffalo Bills organization. He has a strong reputation amongst coaches and players in the NFL. Players are willing to come to Buffalo, yes, to be on a team with Josh Allen. Daquan Jones was one of those guys talking about, come to Buffalo because you get to play with Josh Allen. You've got guys who are going to do that, who want to come play with one of the best players in the league. They know it's a quarterback-driven league, and whether they're on offense or defense, they like the idea of coming to Buffalo and playing for Josh Allen because they think he gives them a good shot to win a championship. But they also recognize the culture and the team and what they are becoming a part of. And that is because of Sean McDermott. So the X's and O's are important, which we know Sean McDermott is good at. And I understand, yes, 13 seconds gaff and all that kind of stuff. But his ability to develop the players in the secondary and squeeze blood from a stone, the scheme ability that we've seen at times from this defense, Sean McDermott is a very good coach, both on and off the field. And that off the field piece, granted, there's definitely a lot of the on the field piece from Sean McDermott and this Bills team, but that off the field piece, Sean McDermott, who he is, what he brings, and what he has transformed this team and this organization into, because your organization is an extension of your head coach. The reason the culture is strong, The reason the camaraderie is there and the teamwork is there and everybody does their 111th and everybody shows up to work with all the cliches with their lunch pail and their hard hat and all that kind of stuff is because they take after their coach who does that. Sean McDermott's a grinder. He's a hard worker. He is the embodiment of what this team is, and the team is the embodiment of him. They are an extension of that head coach, and Von Miller felt it. And that is a large part of why Von Miller is here. And that is part of the importance of Sean McDermott. The X's and O's and the on-the-field stuff are tremendously, tremendously important. I'm an X's and O's guy. I'm a scheme guy. You need to have it. All the rah-rah, culture and nice, fuzzy, warm stuff and everybody loving each other and giving each other hugs, I think is awesome. Doesn't mean anything if you don't produce on the field. And the Bills have. Granted, they've come up short the last couple of years. But that culture piece led by Sean McDermott is fair to look into. That culture that Sean McDermott has established is part of the reason why you got one of the best pass rushers of all time to come to your team. Big, big piece. I see a lot of comments coming through. I'm going to double back. Jowl saying they know what to say. Von's not stupid. If you watch the video, that number blew everyone out of the water. Yeah, I remember the video of him in the house and hearing the number and hearing the money. But again, you still don't have to go and say that. Like, not being stupid and saying what he said about Sean McDermott being like a big reason why he came here. Actually, not even saying a big reason, saying that Coach McDermott, my very first conversation with Coach McDermott was the one that made me come here. He didn't have to say that. You don't have to go that far. And I know Von is good with the media and he's comfortable speaking. And yes, he's not stupid. And yes, he got a ton of money, but he was going to get a bunch of money still. Maybe, yeah, he got the most likely from what we know and what we kind of surmise from the Buffalo Bills. But he wanted to win. He came here. You listen to the presser from Mandatory Minicamp this week. He talked about legacy a lot. He talked about production a lot. And he could have stayed and just lived in LA where it's beautiful and lived in Beverly Hills and played with Aaron Donald and got to stay there. He also talked about that too in the video. He didn't want to leave LA. And yes, the money, I'm sure, was a substantial piece of why he came here. But so was Sean McDermott. So was Sean McDermott. So was this culture. So was this team. Where else? Ned saying, someone who doesn't give a rip about character, doesn't talk about culture and authenticity. You're speaking it while I'm typing it here. Here. Appreciate you, Ned. Ned is a constant supporter of the show here and of Cover One. We appreciate you, Ned. Jason said, do we know if the Rams offered him a contract? Yes. Or at the very least, they wanted to retain him. I don't want to go and say they officially offered him a contract, but I'm fairly certain they did. Because we know Von reached out to Sean McVay to let him know that he was going to sign with the Buffalo Bills. Before he signed with the Bills, he called Sean McVay to let him know, hey, man, I'm going with Buffalo. So at the very least, we know the Rams wanted him back. I'm assuming that meant that there was some sort of contract offering or some sort of solid offer in hand. But, I don't want to jump that far. At the very least, we know the Rams definitely wanted him back. And Von called Sean McVay to let him know that he would not be coming back to the Rams. So we know the Rams wanted him back. Good comment here from Dad of a Bills fan saying, I don't care why he's here. I care that he's here. It's a big point too, but why you should care a little bit why he's here is because that type of leadership from Sean McDermott, who is steering the ship, and the type of culture that he's created, this will continue to bring players of that caliber to Buffalo. It will continue to have players who are drafted here and who grow into become the best version of themselves. It will help them to potentially stay here and want to stay here. So the most important thing, yes, is that Von is here. Whatever drove him here, at the end of the day, who cares? He's here. Fantastic. But you want that sustainability. It's the same thing with diagnosing and breaking down wins and losses in a season. Yes, the most important thing is that you get the win in a game, right? But how you win is also very important, unless it's the Super Bowl, because if you win in that, the season's over and it doesn't matter. But how you win throughout the regular season is what indicates whether or not you will continue to win. How you win indicates sustainability, just like how your organization is built and how and why free agents choose your team, right? Depending on the reason they choose, indicates whether or not future free agents and future players will continue to want to come to that team or stay with that team because of what that team has. So yes, the most important thing is that Von came here and he's here. Fantastic. But I do think it's important to note why he came here, because that why can potentially attract other players of that caliber in the future or convince other players of that caliber to stay in the future. That's a big piece. And so, yeah, Jason's comment, it's nice to know the players want to come here now as opposed to coming here because we had to overpay to get them here. I know everyone always thinks the Mario Williams one. I always think of Derek Dockery, the guard from Washington. Buffalo really paid to bring him here. He wasn't a bad guard, but he just wasn't worth that money. That's what you used to have to do. The Christian Kirk one is a good example. Like, the Jags are trying to surround Trevor Lawrence with talent, and who knows? Maybe they just eyeballed Christian Kirk and they think he can be phenomenal. And so they were like, we got a boatload of money. We think he's a perfect fit. Boom. And maybe he'll be a top 10 receiver and he'll be fantastic. But based on what we've seen so far, what seems to be the case is the Jags had to overpay to get Christian Kirk to come. And if you have to overpay to get someone of Christian Kirk's level, then the ones above him, you have to pay even more. You have to pay astronomical amounts. And again, that's because of a lot of things, but it all stems back to your organization. Do players think they can win there? Do players think going there will help their legacy or help their career? There's all those on the field pieces. Yes, some dudes are just about money, and it's like, oh, that team's going to offer me the most. Cool, right? But some players are a combination of it. And if you have any combination of wanting to win, the quality of your organization impacts you. And yeah, it's nice to know that guys are coming here and not just because we had to overpay them. Dwayne says, fair question to ask. How do we know it was, how do we know it wasn't just about the money? How do we know what Von is saying is genuine? Are we, or could we be reading too much on what words come out of Von's mouth? Of course, you could do that for anything. You can, again, we're surmising, we're trying to piece things together. I'm basing it off of what I've heard him say, things that he said in the past, and comparing him to other things that players have said and how they operate. Again, I think if he was really, not being genuine, and then he sold the hell out of this, going above and beyond and saying this part about Sean McDermott. Again, I'm not talking holistically while he's here. I'm talking about this very poignant part where he said, again, my very first conversation with Coach McDermott, it was one that made me come here. That's what I'm focusing on, the importance of Sean McDermott. He did not have to say that in any way, shape, or form. And I don't even think that's a huge takeaway for everyone. It is for me. And I'm talking, obviously I'm talking about it. It's my lead topic here on this episode. He didn't have to go above and beyond with that piece. That goes above just general warm, fuzzy feelings. That goes above just being like, man, yeah, Bills Mafia is crazy. Yeah, man, Josh Allen, he's got a cannon for an arm. Yeah, Stephon Diggs. Saying what he said in detail about Sean McDermott, that goes above and beyond. And maybe he knows that, and this is all a Jedi mind trick, and he's not being genuine at all. But to me, that indicates that he's being genuine, because that's a level of specificity and a level of detail that you do not see regularly from anyone in a mandatory minicamp or OTA or offseason press conference. This wasn't some special 30 for 30 sit down where he's, peeking at, peeling away all the layers and, pouring his heart out for an interview or for attention or for the limelight. He's just speaking at a press conference. I don't think he goes into that level of specificity and detail with that piece on Sean McDermott if it's not true. But to your point, we don't know. And maybe it's a lie, and maybe it's a work, and he's working everybody. This is different, though. Steve says Tyreek talks about Tua a lot, too. Take it easy. It's not the same. What Von Miller said about Sean McDermott versus what Tyreek Hill is saying about Tua is not the same. One, because the things that he's saying about Tua are being called into question by everyone. Sean McDermott being spoken about in this light by Von Miller is something that we've heard echoed from other coaches, from players on the Bills, from people in the league, because of how highly respected Sean McDermott is. So one, it tracks and it checks out. Two, Tyreek Hill is still kind of talking in generalities. Like, Tyreek Hill is being asked about Tua's arm strength, and he's like, yeah, he's good. He's got a good arm. I love playing with him. He puts the ball right on the money. That's the equivalent of being like, hey, Von, do you like Sean McDermott? And he's like, yeah, he's a good coach. I'm learning a lot. Von Miller didn't do that here. He went into a detailed, specific, firsthand account of Sean McDermott. It's different. Von Miller talking about Sean McDermott is not the same as Tua talking about Tyreek Hill. So it's not the same thing. Oh, appreciate you, Vito. Vito saying smash that like. Yes, do smash that like. If you are here watching live, please and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire Cover One team to track and trend in front of more eyes ears, viewers, listens, all that kind of stuff, please. And thank you. Drop a like on this video. Or if you're listening later and you're not watching live, that's cool. Drop a like right now, please. It goes a long way. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. What else? What else? Ooh, Kendall. Kendall's fantastic. And Kendall, he breaks it down to a little formula here. Kendall says, I'm going to need at least 50% viewers to likes ratio. What are we doing, guys? 52 watching and only 24 likes. Come on, show Ant some love, putting in the work. I appreciate you, Kendall. Kendall's always putting in the work. And yeah, guys, come on. I'm all by myself here, putting in that work by myself. Give me some love. Oh, Michael gets it. Big Tree Game Ant. Yeah, I like that nickname. I'm going to put that. I think I might put that in my Twitter bio if it fits. I like that a lot. Ooh. Steven coming with some fire. Steven saying, suggesting that Von's being disingenuous is ludicrous. Ooh. Fair point. So you can do it on both sides. But again, thank you, Andre. Andre is saying, I love your show. Appreciate you. Andre Dubois. I like that name. Appreciate you, my man. And Jim saying, already liked. Appreciate you, Jim. Thank you very much. But yeah, you could try and play, the opposite or go cynical or, play the antithesis to what I'm saying and saying, Von's being disingenuous and it's not true, but you don't go to that level of specificity. Again, maybe Von's a sociopath, who knows? But I don't think you go to that level of specificity and detail unless those feelings are true. And again, to harken back to the comment from Steve, I don't think what Von Miller said about Sean McDermott is the same as what Tyreek Hill said about Tua. And again, Tyreek Hill is speaking in generalities in public forums on public shows. Like this is Von just like in his own, aura and ether and environment at a presser. Like he doesn't have to go into that level of detail. He can literally be as general as he wants because he has to do what he's doing and the media have to be there. He does not have to give any nugget of information for anything. That's part of it too. He doesn't have to do any of that. Tyreek Hill is going to these things and saying these things on podcasts and saying these things in the press and trying to draw more attention to himself. It's not the same situation. So, again, everybody's got an opinion, to each their own, but it's important. You know what else is important? I like to bring it up at different points. Sometimes I bring it up at the beginning, sometimes midway. The sponsor of the show is tremendously important. One Pie Pizza. You guys know the drill. You see it in the bottom right of your screen. You see the logo there. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether you're listening here on YouTube, watching on YouTube, listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go get yourself some of the best pizza in Buffalo, hands down. Delicious sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, a fantastic cheese to sauce ratio, great dough and crust. They make their own blue cheese. The homemade blue cheese is so good. I'd probably just put it in a bottle and drink it straight, even without the pizza. And they're great people. They do lots of initiatives, whether it's for, not trying to knock out cancer, Toys for Tots, the SPCA, just things to stay active in the community. They're great people making great pizza. Treat yourself to some One Pie Pizza and their other food and everything they got there. They make a lot and they're great and they're tremendous. I wouldn't have partnered with them if they weren't as great as they are. Again, online menu can be found in the episode show notes. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. And now, that's right, Dwayne knows, buy that pie, and then chance for buy that pie. Fantastic. And then Dwayne says, Golden Tree Ant. I like it. He says, anyhow, I was playing devil's advocate, looking at both sides. I do think Von is authentic. And again, I think that's fair to play devil's advocate. I do it myself with everything. I did it with these topics. I pride myself on my objectivity in anything, regardless of what I'm doing. Objectivity guides me for a lot of what I do in almost anything. I think objectivity is the way to go. I don't believe really that, subjectivity should override that ever. So I appreciate your devil's advocate point to it. And again, I think that's fair because you can do it with all this. You can be like, he's not serious. He's not genuine. He's playing us. He doesn't care about any of that. Maybe as soon as the camera goes off, he walks back and he's like, I hate it here. And I hate Sean McDermott. Who knows? Could be. I just don't think so based on the evidence of what we've seen when you really peel back the layers and dive into it like I have, because I spent way more time watching pressers and transcribing them than like a normal sane person should. So that's where we're at, but very fair. Now, next topic. This was originally going to be my lead before I saw what Von Miller said about Sean McDermott, and I wanted to highlight that importance of Sean McDermott again because so many were gathering their, torches and pitchforks, like Sean McDermott with Shrek once the Bills lost to the Chiefs, which again, emotions ride high. And it's fair to, get too emotional at times. But the Bills got a great one in Sean McDermott, and that greatness is part of why Von Miller came here. It was a large part of why Von Miller came here, and I wanted to highlight that. But now, the man who is in the graphic for this episode, Mr. Jordan Poyer. Jordan Poyer was present in mandatory minicamp after not being present in OTAs, and he practiced as if all was normal, which is fantastic. He's one of the best players on this team. He's a leader on this team, which was said by Micah Hyde, which was said by Sean McDermott. It was said last week by Leslie Frazier. I expected Jordan Poyer to be here, so I wasn't shocked or surprised that he was here. Leslie Frazier talked last week about how he's been in communication with Poyer. Several of the coaches had mentioned that, like, they've been in talks with him. They expected him to be here. He was here. He showed up, did his job. I expect Jordan Poyer to show up, ball out. Also, again, not even from a warm and fuzzy perspective, to play the devil's advocate side. He's going to take a big financial loss if he holds out under the new CBA and how you're penalized for missing practices and mandatory things. So he didn't show up to the voluntary parts where he wouldn't be penalized. He didn't have to be. He showed up to the mandatory parts. So awesome. Glad that he's here. Whether it's because of his sense of duty to the team or because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze anymore. Either way, he was here, which is good to see. We know the talks about his contract. And I wanted to highlight some things, as we talk about Jordan Poyer here, and then shift things to the expectations for the secondary as a whole, based on what we saw in practices this week and based on what we heard in the pressers. I guess I hadn't really paid attention to the money before, but Minkah Fitzpatrick signed a new deal today. And I'm just referencing this for, the structure of how safeties are paid. So Minkah Fitzpatrick today inked a 4 years, $73.6 million extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with $36 million guaranteed, with an $18.4 million average annual value, making him the highest paid safety in NFL history. So with what he's now being paid, again, per average annual value, the amount of money he makes per season, he's now number one in terms of pay for safeties, which means, and again, this is crazy, Jordan Poyer currently, in terms of average annual value and pay for safeties, is 13th, and Micah Hyde is 14th. They are two of the best safeties in the NFL. They are the best safety tandem and duo in the NFL. They're both all-pro caliber year after year. Jordan Poyer, again, with that Minkah Fitzpatrick extension, Jordan Poyer is 13th in terms of average annual value for safeties, and Micah Hyde is 14th. It is going to be very interesting to see what happens with Jordan Poyer, because on the one hand, you've got a tremendous value with what you've gotten out of Jordan Poyer and what you've gotten out of Micah Hyde. And then on the other side, from Jordan Poyer's side, he is vastly underpaid. Now, I don't think anybody should expect the Minkah Fitzpatrick deal. I mentioned that just to use that as a reference point, because that's what the top looks like. Minkah Fitzpatrick is 6 years younger than Jordan Poyer, and honestly, he's probably the best safety in the NFL. He's tremendous, but that's what the top guy is getting, right? But Jordan Poyer is an all-pro. His versatility is tremendous. What money he commands is going to be very interesting. So per Spot Track, his market value right now as a UFA next year, his market value is $10.7 million. The deal projected is 2 years, $21.49 million, which would only make him 12th in terms of average annual value for safeties. And it would put him around Jimmy Ward, safety for the 49ers, who's at 9.5. Tyrann Mathieu, who is on the Saints now, at 9.4. Devin McCourty, who is at 9. And then also Justin Reed, free agent from the Texans, who signed with the Chiefs. I think that was a really good signing for the Chiefs. Justin Reed is super underrated and forgotten about because he played for the Texans, but I digress. Justin Reed's deal that he inked this offseason carries a 10.5 AAV. So seeing what Poyer gets is going to be very interesting. He's on, how they like to say, the wrong side of 30, but he is at a position that ages gracefully, but he is tremendously important. Jim coming through saying, pay Poyer. That's fair. I say it all the time. Again, the reason the show is named Disguise Coverage is because of the Bills' ability to disguise coverage, because of what Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde allow them to do. They came at a time where you still had free safety and strong safety. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer got rid of those. They're just safeties. They can both be a box safety. They can both be a post safety. They can both function in a variety of ways. They can cover tight ends or receivers. They can cover in the slot. They can go out wide and cover in man. They can function in 2 high looks, single high looks. Again, box. They can blitz. They can run fit. They do so much. Jordan Poyer deserves way, way more money than he's getting. But the Bills are going to have to weigh how much he gets paid, obviously, as we know, with what the salary cap is going to be, who else they have to pay. I think it's pretty. I said it all offseason leading up to this, even before we knew that Poyer was upset. I thought it was going to be hard for the Bills to retain Poyer because of he genuinely deserves like top 7 safety money, maybe even top 5, right? But because of his age, I don't know if he's going to get it. Granted, the salary cap is going to continue to go up with the TV deal and as things start to readjust for the positive monetarily post-COVID. But Poyer is tremendously important. And Mike Hyde spoke on Jordan Poyer at mandatory minicamp this week. And he said 2 things that I thought were tremendously poignant about him. Granted, that's his boy. But Hyde came out and said about Poyer, that's a guy I feel like you can't replace. And then he came out, and again, these are the little details that could be general. And you could say, like, well, of course he's going to say that. That's his boy, and Poyer's really good. But then he said another piece, and he said, I wouldn't be the player I am today without him. And I think it's safe to say that he wouldn't be the player he is without me. And that's something that's a direct quote. And that's something I think about a lot when it comes to the progression of Hyde and Poyer. They both came in together as, Poyer was an afterthought in free agency. Micah Hyde wasn't a star or a stud on the open market, but he was a guy that Packers fans didn't want to let go. But he was more of a slot corner and a punt returner. And he was brought in. And a lot of it was, well, what is he going to do for the Bills? He's playing slot. And I was like, nope, he's going to move to safety. And he's transitioned into an all-pro safety in the same time of being here with Jordan Poyer. Their development and their careers with the Buffalo Bills are forever linked right now at this point. And this is part of the problematic nature of, Poyer potentially leaving. Not only do you lose Jordan Poyer and a player of his caliber and a player of his level, what kind of drop-off do you see from Micah Hyde? Because they both play off each other so well because they're both interchangeable. Poyer allows Hyde to be successful. Hyde allows Poyer to be successful. You can very easily make a case that losing one significantly impacts the other. And so it would hurt you double. If you lose Jordan Poyer, you lose an all-pro safety. But then how much does your other all-pro safety, how much does his game drop a little bit, right? These guys are a perfect tandem. They're a perfect fit in any day and age, but especially with the nature of today's NFL and how defenses are playing to combat how the offensive game has expanded and evolved on the other side of the ball. They're super important. I don't think Hyde and Poyer, either of them, are the best player on the Buffalo Bills defense, but I genuinely think you can make a case that they are the most important players on this Bills defense, especially given the nature of today's NFL and their skill sets and traits and what they allow you to do on defense. They're tremendously important. And again, like I mentioned, right now, and Hyde's an unrestricted free agent in 2 years. So next year, we could be having this exact same conversation that we're having about Poyer now. We could be having it about Hyde next year. But it's wild right now. With Minkah Fitzpatrick's extension, Poyer is currently 13th in average annual value for safeties, and Micah Hyde is 14th. They both deserve to be paid way higher. So it's very understandable why Poyer wants to be compensated given the work that he's put in and the level that he's playing at. But you also understand it from the Bills' side of why they can't completely commit financially. I'm really hoping they go for a deal with shorter term, but potentially more money, and we kind of lock him in. I'm hoping he signs somewhere anywhere between 10 and 13 million average annual value. I think that's still workable, but it's going to be tough. I saw a lot of comments coming through, and I want to start to go through. Jason says, Ant, let's face the facts. Who doesn't say good things in front of everyone but sits in anger behind closed doors about any job? Again, very fair. I think that happens everywhere. But there's a difference in saying good things in front of everyone versus saying good things with specificity and detail. There's a difference in being like, yeah, I love this coach. He's fantastic. Versus being like, yeah, I love this coach. He's fantastic because he does A, B, C, because this happened, that happened. Here's all these specific, readily available examples. There's a difference between those two things. There's a difference in saying good things in coach speak and in general versus saying good things with specificity and detail, especially when unprompted to a degree. There's a difference in that, but I digress. Jason says, at this point, I'm not sure what Bean does with Poyer. I know we're better with him, but I don't know what Bean's monetary value is for him. That's fair. Bum, bum, bum. Dwayne says, so if you believe Vaughn likes the place, the coach, the players in the town, one would think Poyer feels the same way. Um, is these the same views that Vaughn has, the same as what Poyer sees? Thus, Poyer just wants. I mean, Poyer. Oh, and then Dwayne says a signed contract. Poyer just wants to be fairly compensated. Again, I think he's not being paid his worth right now. The value for the Bill side again is tremendous. What he's being paid versus the output and return on investment you're getting are night and day, are tremendous. But he's underpaid. Again, I'm saying that as a guy is making like tens of $1 millions, which is crazy to always think of that. We're sitting here talking about these guys who are straight millionaires, and we're sitting there being like, this guy's underpaid. Like he makes a good amount of money, but in reference to his profession and to other players in his profession and his position grouping, he is underpaid. Oh, Jamal with some heat. Jamal says, in my opinion, as much as I love Poyer, might as well let him hit free agency and give Hamlin a shot to compete against whoever they bring in next summer, either a rookie or a cheaper vet. Ooh, that's some spice. I am not ready at all right now to give the keys to DeMar Hamlin. I would be much comfortable with a high value draft pick or free agent, but I do like DeMar Hamlin. I like Jaquan Johnson as well. I just think he's more limited in terms of his skill set potentially. He's more of a box safety that he can function in some too high looks. You could use him single high every once in a while to keep the offense honest. But both of those guys right now are a significant downgrade from Poyer. Hamlin is, I guess, the better overall safety. He ticks more boxes, but Jaquan Johnson's strengths are better than DeMar Hamlin's strengths for me right now, depending on how you look at it. But that's some spice. Comment here from Kendall. Kendall says if the Bills do pay Poyer, I think I kind of answered this ironically already. Kendall says if the Bills do pay Poyer, what level AAV do you think it will land at ballpark? Top 10, top 7. So again, Justin Reed is right in front of Poyer and Hyde right now. So he's at 10.5 average annual value, which puts him at 12th in terms of average annual value for safeties. And again, Poyer's market value is 10.7. I think top 10. If Poyer gets paid by the Bills, I think he's easily in the top 10. And then it's a matter of how high as I think 7 is a good number. I think I mentioned that earlier, Kendall. I think top 10 to 7 is realistic. Again, it's based on the age. If Poyer was having this level of output and he was still not even 25, 26, that's a no-brainer. But if he was still 27, 28, even 29, I think he gets locked up to a 3 or 4 year deal right now. And is paid like a top 5 safety. The only reason there's hesitation is because of the age and because actually he doesn't even have a ton of mileage on the tires because he didn't play a ton early in his career because of injury. But I think the only hesitation is age and longevity of how sustainable is the output and the production that he has right now. How sustainable is that as he gets older? Granted, again, safeties age more gracefully, but the way he plays the safety position lends itself more to a youthful player. Obviously, you can say that for any player and position in the NFL because it's a young man's game, all those proverbials and all those adages and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if the Bills pay Poyer, he's definitely in the top 10. I would put him top 6 average annual value is the highest, but I think top 7, top 10 to 7 is that sweet spot. So you nailed it. What else? Yeah, Steven says PowerPoint, laugh out loud, Poyer. And the reason that's funny is because Steven's earlier comment says, you realize PowerPoint and Vaughn are two different people, right? Different careers, history, and personality. Steven was speaking to somebody else in the chat and said PowerPoint instead of Poyer. And I think that's hilarious. That's fantastic. Dwayne says, I don't think it's about Poyer wanting top money. He wants it signed, sealed, and delivered, done. Remember, one injury, puts him hundreds of thousands behind. I agree. He obviously wants a firm deal, but he's just not going to sign anything. Like the money is part of it. He wants, term and money, but I think he wants those. Maybe he wants one more than the other, but the money is definitely there. Like it's not just. And granted, I also don't think he wants top money. I don't think he's coming out and saying, I want to be the highest paid safety in the league, but I think he wants somewhere in that 10 to 13 average annual value. Because again, I think he's looking at the rest of the league. And actually, I'm going to pull him up right now. I think he's looking at the rest of the league and saying, okay, here's the safeties that are ahead of me. I should be paid higher than this guy. I should be paid higher than that guy. So right now, the list of safeties that are paid higher than Jordan Poyer: Justin Reed of the Chiefs, John Johnson of the Browns, Jesse Bates, who's on a franchise tag for the Bengals, Quandre Diggs of the Seahawks, Marcus Williams of the Ravens, Kevin Byard of the Titans, Eddie Jackson of the Bears, Buda Baker of the Cardinals, and I accidentally clicked his name, Justin Simmons of the Broncos, Harrison Smith of the Vikings, Jamal Adams of the Seahawks. Jamal Adams was number one until Minka Fitzpatrick supplanted him today. I think Poyer's looking at those safeties that are ahead of him and saying, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than this guy. I should be paid more than this guy, than this guy, than this guy, than this guy. Obviously, yeah, he wants a firm contract delivered, signed, ready to go. But I think part of it is that money, knowing his worth and knowing where he wants to be paid, which I don't think that's unique to him. I think that's for everybody, right? Yeah, Steven saying that's the funniest one I had in reference to that typo. Yeah, I saw PowerPoint and I knew you meant Poyer, but it was just, again, this... You do realize PowerPoint and Vaughn are two different people. Yeah, of course. Like one's a program and one is a football player. But yeah, that's hilarious. Oh, good comment here from Dwayne, or question. Dwayne says Ant, referencing Poyer and Hyde. They're a great pair, but has the lack of speed on the back end pre-Elam hurt us? Yes. I think both of them are quicker than they are fast. Neither, and this is true for a majority of the Bills defense, no one is really long speed. No one really has long speed. Trey White was probably the fastest before his ACL injury. But again, he's more quicker than fast. I don't think anybody on this defense is tremendously speedy from a long speed perspective. I think they're all overall athletic, and I think they're quicker than they are fast, but I think they're more technical. Again, and Steven even comes here and says, the lack of speed at safety. What? Yeah, I don't think Poyer and Hyde, I wouldn't classify Poyer and Hyde as fast. And Steven references that interception against New England in the playoffs. I think that was from Micah. I think that was mental and technique. Yes, he had to run. So he had to show speed. He had to show quickness. He had to show agility. But a lot of it was tied into the hip fluidity to make the speed turn. But a lot of it was the angle that he took towards the football. And, if we're being fair, a lot of it was Mac Jones did not look off Micah Hyde. He pumped Levi on that side, but he kept looking to that left, and Micah Hyde read it and just drifted and then made a beeline for the ball. So you have to have the speed to make that play. But I don't think Micah Hyde made that play because of his speed. Yes, it helps. I think he made that play because of his ability to play safety. The angle that he took to the football, there was not one wasted step. There was no wasted motion, wasted movement, nothing. His angle to the football was tremendous. And again, him and Poyer are both quicker than they are fast, but I wouldn't classify either of them as speedy or fast guys. If anybody plays Madden, Kendall, if you're still here, feel free to let me know what their Madden speeds are, because I feel like maybe at tops they're like 92s, 91s, 93s maybe. I haven't played Madden in forever, but I wouldn't classify them as like speedy or fast guys. And to Dwayne's point, has the lack of speed on the back end pre-Elam hurt us? I think a lack of speed on the defense as a whole has hurt the Bills. The Bills' fastest position grouping, like if you're looking from a long speed perspective, is probably Milano and Edmonds, like their linebackers and their range and their speed. But the secondary speed for a while, again, this secondary is good because of how good they are from a technicality perspective. They are so good in zone, soft, like spot drop zone. They're good in pattern match zone, both in man match and zone match. They are so good at knowing their responsibilities and knowing each other's responsibilities. That's why Levi Wallace was so good, right? Levi was not tall. He was not big. He was not strong. He was not long. He was not fast. But he knew his responsibility. He did his 111th, and all of his teammates knew where he was going to be and when he was going to be there. He was that guy who was in the proverbial right place in the right time, and he did his job. Everybody on the Bills defense does their job, right? Now you had somebody like Kyer Elam, who you turn the dial up on the overall team speed on the back end. It helps. But yes, I think that lack of speed on the back end has hurt the Bills. But again, I think they're quicker than they are fast. I don't think they have that overall long speed. Where are we? Man, a lot of questions coming through. John comes in. John, this is wild. John says, I still say Hamlin can do everything Poyer can do. I strongly disagree. He is not shown. If you believe in that, it's pure projection because Damar Hamlin has not shown the ability at the NFL level to function in the same way that Jordan Poyer does. And saying again, even if you feel there's a couple, things that there's some overlap, okay, but saying Damar Hamlin can do everything Poyer can do, it's a very strong take. Very, very, very strong take. Yes, Steven, every time when you're on the show, if you're referencing Jordan Poyer, you have to say PowerPoint. I'll know what you mean. If people in the chat don't, you'll have to explain it. I'll try to explain it as well. But yes, every time you're here, which is a lot, you're tremendous. You're always here supporting me. I appreciate the hell out of you. Yes, you have to say PowerPoint from now on. Those are the rules. For as long as Jordan Poyer is a Buffalo Bill, you have to say PowerPoint when you are here as a guest on the show. So appreciate you. Kendall came back with the Madden speed again. Not that Madden is the Bible and the gospel here, but Kendall says I think both of them are at 90 or lower, meaning Hyde and Poyer in terms of their speed. Yeah. Jason says, is Elam now our fastest defender? From a pure 40 time standpoint, probably. I think so. I think he's a couple tenths of a second or whatever faster than Tre'Davious White from a 40 time perspective. Although I don't think Kaiir Elam played as fast as his 40 time indicates. We'll see. But yeah, I don't think Kaiir Elam plays as fast as his 40 time indicates. But from a pure 40 time perspective, yes. Kaiir Elam is probably the fastest on this Bills defense. Dwayne comes through with the stats. Poyer on Madden, his speed is 88. Micah Hyde's is 89. Again, not that Madden is the gospel, but I think that's I think that's actually pretty accurate. I think that's fair. Yes, and exactly, Steven. Steven says speed for safeties is a lot like it is for center fielders. It helps, but routes, positioning, and fluidity are more important. Yeah, that's, again, the routes to the football they take, how smart they are, how heady, the way they anticipate, the way they read and process in front of them, because that's also part of it too, right? You can be the fastest physically, like the fastest player in the world, but if you can't process at that speed, you're playing slow. Hyde and Poyer, neither of them are burners, but they play fast because of their processing speed. And yes, they aren't slow, but they aren't tremendously fast, but they've got a little speed to them. They've got more quickness than they do speed, but they process so fast. They're tremendously heady and smart players. They prepare well, and they diagnose pre-snap and post-snap in the blink of an eye, and that's the reason they both play so well. And again, that interception versus New England, very athletic play by Hyde, but I highlight, the hip fluidity and the speed turn, and then the angle that he takes to the ball. There is no wasted movement. It is exactly like a center fielder. There's no going like this to get to the ball. It is a straight line from his launch point to the ball for that interception, which is unreal. Awesome. Awesome from Eric. 1, Eric, thank you for being here. 2, thank you for the super chat. 3, nailed it. PowerPoint is a great nickname for Poyer. Everybody here will forever remember that Jordan PowerPoint Poyer is where we're going from now on. When John comes in, yes, Nick McLeod at a 4.37. I was thinking of it from more of a, no disrespect to Nick McLeod, but from more of a starters. Granted, Nick McLeod has been having a good offseason. He looked good in OTAs. He looked good in mandatory minicamp. He also got some work at safety in mandatory minicamp, which is very interesting. I have my eye on him for the preseason. Yes, McLeod runs the 4.37, but I was thinking more from a, to Jason's point, McLeod is a practice squad guy. I wasn't counting him. I was thinking, more from like the guys who are first or second string, talking about overall speed. But yes, McLeod is probably the fastest, or is the fastest from a 40 time perspective. You're including everyone. Good comment here from John about Hyde and Poyer. They both have great anticipation. It's like they see a bubble over the quarterback's helmet and can see what they are thinking. Yeah, it's like you're in the comics, and then they read it, boom, and react. We've talked a lot about this secondary, expectations for this secondary. I wanted to tie this in with just some notes about Kaiir Elam, both in terms of what Sean McDermott said and what Micah Hyde said about Elam. They all echo the same points and the same sentiment. And again, this is what you try to key in on when you're trying to project things and accurately depict what will happen for a player or a team in an upcoming season. You look for things that continue to be repeated, but that aren't general and that are more specific to them. No matter who you speak to, Tre'Davious White, Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott, Micah Hyde, They all echo the same things about Kyer Elam: his professionalism, how much he pays attention, how diligent his notes are, how he listens. And what was cool with Micah Hyde said that Kyer behaves a lot like Tre'Davious White did when he came in, which I thought was awesome. And then again, those expectations for the secondary, I wanted to tie it in with more positive praise for Dane Jackson from Sean McDermott. He continued to speak highly of Dane Jackson, called Dane Jackson a winner. Last week, Leslie Frazier said that Dane Jackson is one of the best young tackling corners in the entire NFL. They're really high on Dane Jackson. They like him. They like his style. They like his scheme fit. Anticipation for the secondary and expectations for the secondary, I don't want to guarantee it, but I don't think Tre'Davious White is playing game one against the Rams. I think realistically, October is a good kind of barometer or, placeholder in terms of when he will return. I think your starters for the first quarter of the year are going to be at the corner position are going to be Kyer Elam and Dane Jackson. And again, I'm okay with that. I want Tre'Davious White to take as long as he needs to heal. I don't care if Tre'Davious White is healthy in September. I care about Tre'Davious White being healthy in December and January, because that was, I don't want to pinpoint one thing, but that was a significant piece of why the Bills lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know how much it changes. I don't know how to quantify it, but I know if Tre'Davious White was in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs, that game doesn't happen like it did for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs don't put up 40 against the Bills if Tre'Davious White is there. But again, that highlights something that I was concerned about last year at this time, which was the depth of the corner position, the rock, paper, scissors functionality and versatility that they did not have because of the skill sets and traits and lack of speed and lack of man coverage ability and scheme versatility and all those things. But I digress. The expectations for this secondary coming into this year, based on what we've heard about Kyer Elam and Leslie Frazier, again, talking last week about how they need Kyer to be up to speed like right away, and they need him. All the positives you hear about Dane Jackson, we continue to hear about, whenever he's called upon, he answers the bell. Whenever he steps in for anybody, he's strong. He does this, he does that. He's a winner, all these positive things. I think Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam are your opening day starters. I don't even think that's too revelatory or too crazy or like a hot take. I think the Bills are going to be cautious with Trey, as with you would with anybody coming back from an ACL, let alone a corner who constant change of direction, constant planning and rotation on those joints. You need to have confidence that he's ready to go, but also Trey needs confidence in himself. He needs to have confidence in his own knee. Anybody coming back from an injury, that if you're not 100% or until you really test it and go, you're like, can I make that cut? Can I do that? Like, you can't have that in the NFL. You cannot hesitate for a split second because you're wondering about the structural integrity or health of a major part of your body in general, let alone a cornerback in the NFL, who everybody in the NFL needs their knees, but especially a corner more than some others. So I think they take their time with Trey, and I think the expectations for this secondary on opening day, you see the two stud safeties, knock on wood, Hyde, Poyer, and then you see Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam starting at the corner spots, which again, I think is fair. And also what was interesting, Sean McDermott noted that Kyer Elam has been getting work with the second and first team groupings. And that, he talked, again, some coach speak, but he's going through normal growing pains. He also had an interception today of Josh Allen on a miscommunication between Josh Allen and Jamison Crowder. Some pieces there, but yeah, I think Dane Jackson's going to see more playing time early on in the year than people may be ready to accept. I think people are thinking Trey's going to be ready and good to go for game one. And if he is, awesome. I gladly take him against Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson and that Rams attack led by Matthew Stafford. But I think it's realistic to expect that Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam are your starters on opening day and probably through September. Where are we going? Kendall says, Ant, stop sharing my brain. I was just going to mention McLeod getting time at safety. Well, unfortunately, I said it first because I'm on the air, and no one's going to believe you that you were actually thinking that because I got to say it first because, again, I have the proof on video and you're just in the chat. So, sorry. Jason, good comment. Speed is absolutely nothing if you can't multitask while on the field. Very true. Game speed is different than time speed. John Ross is a good example. Burner, wide receiver, drafted in the top 10, I believe, by the Bengals. Wide receiver out of Washington, ran like a 4.2 something, but doesn't play at a 4.2, and also doesn't have the route tree that's needed to succeed at the NFL level, and the understanding of leverages and coverage and all that kind of stuff. So speed isn't everything, although it is tremendously helpful. You do need more than that. Oh, Steven says, Ant, is there a chance that McLeod makes it as a backup safety? I watched him at Notre Dame. Guy is dogged. Yeah, he is a dog. He also had that nice interception in the preseason last year that I think got called back. I will say this for Nick McLeod. He got picked up by the Bengals when put on waivers by the Bills. And then the first chance the Bills had to scoop him back up, he got scooped back up. So he was wanted by, at the very least, 2 teams, and the Bills did their darndest to bring him back to Buffalo. So I don't think he's just a body. I don't think he's just a practice squad guy. I think they could see something in him. His speed is real. I want to see how he functions at safety with actual reps against actual competition with pads on. I'd love to see him get some work at safety in the preseason. As of right now, I think the backup safeties, though, are pretty locked. I think it's Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson. Like if Hamlin or Jaquan Johnson lose the backup safety spot, it's because Josh Thomas did great, or one of Thomas or one of Johnson or Hamlin failed miserably and then got outplayed. Like, I think those are their spots to lose as of right now. Kendall says, I hope Dane doesn't get a ton of playing time this year so we can re-sign him in value. I would love Dane Jackson to be the consummate third corner on this Bills team. I think he can function a variety of ways. I do think his tackling is tremendous. I love his physicality, and I do like his scheme fit. His ceiling is limited because of his speed, but he's got toughness. He's got some ball skills. More from a breakup standpoint than an interception standpoint, but he rallies, he tackles, he can crack replace, he can take on blockers, he's physical, and he's smart and responsible in his zone. He's got good zone eyes, and even his man coverage technique isn't bad. Again, he's just limited as an athlete, which limits his upside. But yeah, I would love for Dane Jackson to be the consummate third or fourth corner on this team for forever. Ooh, John with a fun thing here saying, I watched the game where Rice just destroyed his knee the second time, and Jerry Rice rushed back from an ACL injury and injured his knee worse. I don't remember Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice tore his ACL? I remember the Steve Young concussion on Monday Night Football against the Cardinals when Aeneas Williams ended his career. I don't remember the Jerry Rice ACL tear. I'm kind of at a loss here. Very interesting. Sorry, Kendall. Kendall saying that was rude. I'm hurt. Stop trying to copy my thoughts. Stop trying to come in the chat and acting like you're saying the same stuff as I am. Everybody sees through your lies, and we don't believe you. But I appreciate you being here as always. Good factoid here from Kendall. Kendall saying, when Nick McLeod was at NC State, he had a solid game versus T. Higgins and Justin Ross. Great preseason last year. I think there's an outside shot he makes the team. Very fair. Especially when we're looking at corner. What do you got here? You got Trey, you got Elam, you got Dane Jackson, you've got Cam Lewis, who we know they like and has the slot versatility there. Saron Neal's going to make the team as kind of a safety corner, but mainly special teamer. Other than that, who's really standing in Nick McLeod's way? Like, if he has a strong preseason, and again, because Trey's not going to play, we'll see how many reps Dane Jackson gets in the preseason, but I would expect Kaiir Elam and Nick McLeod to factor heavily in the preseason. So yeah, I think, I definitely think there's an outside shot that Nick McLeod makes the team because he's going to get a lot of reps and he's going to get the opportunity to succeed. If he doesn't make the team, I don't think it will be because of, goodness gracious, I don't think it will be because of a lack of opportunity or a lack of reps. Again, knock on wood, God forbid injury or anything like that. I think he's going to get every opportunity this year because of what the Bills already have at corner and then the injury to Trey. So we'll see that. Look at Kendall. Amy's got your back. Amy says, don't be hurt, Kendall. You are an amazing workhorse at your age. We love you. Look at you got Amy in your corner, Kendall. Don't be sad. It's okay. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Nick McLeod. And I'm very interested to see what happens with the secondary as a whole. But those are some of my expectations for that group. We got a little bit off track, but again, not surprised with how we do here on the show. Last topic, we'll start to wrap things up here. Von Miller's impact, Ed Oliver and AJ Epenesa. I'm very excited I've said this on the show multiple times. the impact that Von Miller has from like off the field coaching and teaching you how to behave and prepare. Like we've heard multiple players at this point say it. AJ Epenesa said it. Gregory Rousseau said it in week 1 of OTAs. Epenesa said it today. Ed Oliver said it today. Like they're all learning from Von Miller how to prepare, how to practice, how hard he goes in practice every day, and how he approaches the game, how he takes care of his body, all that kind of stuff. But from an on the field perspective, Von Miller's impact, and Ed Oliver talked about it today. He came right out and said it. Like, I'm excited for one-on-one opportunities and for offenses to have to double team Von Miller, which frees me up. And this is a tweet I put out multiple times this offseason. But out of the top 50 players in ESPN's pass rush win rate metric, so and regardless of position, so just the top 50 players in pass rush win rate, it could be a defensive tackle, defensive lineman, edge rusher, whatever have you. Ed Oliver had the 5th highest double team rate last year of players who were in the top 50 pass rush win rate. Pass rush win rate. Goodness gracious, I'm falling apart here. Ed Oliver got double teamed a lot last year, and he still had a beast of a season. Ed Oliver's tape is tremendous. The speed, the hands, the get off, the explosion, the burst, the violence. He had a strong year last year. And again, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I don't think it's talked about enough because he didn't have the sack numbers, and people think like, okay, if you don't get sacks, you're not doing anything against the quarterback. He had a really good year last year. He's going to see a lot of one-on-one opportunities now. And in a perfect world, if you can get interior pass rush on a quarterback, that is the most deadly and disruptive thing to any quarterback. Pressure right up the gut, right in your face is almost a death knell for a quarterback. It's hard to navigate around and manipulate the pocket when that happens. It's hard to figure out throwing lanes and escape. It's hard to evade. There's just so many negatives when you get pressure right up the gut. And if Ed Oliver gets those one-on-one opportunities, really excited to see him succeed because of that impact of Von Miller. Also, AJ Epenesa, again, he highlighted, some of the, learnings that he had from the pass rush summit with Von Miller, but I like some of the things that he said. So right now he's at about 263 or 262 pounds, which again, he came in at about 280 as a rookie a couple years ago. So big weight change, body transformation. He said he's trying to stay in that 260, 265 range. That's his goal for the year. He also talked about being in the training room more before practices in order to prepare himself for the day. He wants to do that for games as well. He wants to enter games to the point where he's already loose and ready to go and not feeling like he still has to get warmed up. So he's taken a holistic change to his approach this offseason. He talked about training down in Florida, living with his sister down there, and how health forward and health focused and health conscious she is, and really changing his diet and being all about nutrition in addition to working on his technique and his pass rush plan and his moves. And again, really still adjusting to not being the, more brutal bull of a pass rusher that he was at Iowa when he played at a heavier weight, and being more speedy and technical here for the Buffalo Bills. But he's another guy who, again, highlighted his offseason and went into the specifics of it. I'm falling apart. I apologize. Talking about, what he did from a technical standpoint. But again, another guy who talked about diet and regimen and routine and continuing to transform his body and really build upon that. And somebody needs to step up from a pass rush perspective, opposite of Von Miller. It could be Gregory Rousseau, right? It could be. But it just has to be one of them. It has to be one of Rousseau or Basham or Epenesa or I don't care who. But there needs to be another edge rushing presence from a pass rush productivity standpoint for the Buffalo Bills. It can't just be Von Miller. And again, I'm saying it probably for the 17th time this offseason on this show. The best pass rusher after Von Miller is Ed Oliver, which is cool. That's awesome. I love that interior pass rush. After him, it's all questions. Who's the next best pass rusher? You can genuinely make a case that it's either Rousseau or Epenesa. I don't think it's Boogie right now. Maybe he's changed. And Epenesa even mentioned, Boogie being at the lighter weight, he's got an extra twitch and an extra step, a little more juice to him being at that lighter weight. But, we led with the OTAs. The first segment in the OTA for OTA week 1, 3 weeks ago, was Sean McDermott calling out those young guys and saying that somebody has to step up in a primary role, not just a secondary role, and that the Bills need them to. Leslie Frazier echoed those same and similar sentiments last week in OTAs. Somebody's got to step up. I loved what Epenesa said today. He was my dark horse pick last year as a breakout guy, and he flashed in that Miami game in week 2 and then just didn't consistently put it together. We know there are questions about his confidence and Boogie's and even Rousseau's based on what Frazier said last week, and also questions about how each of them approach the game and approach practice every single day and every single week. Like, there are questions about those 3 young guys, about how they prepare every day in practice, and then even obviously bigger questions in terms of what they do when they get in the game. So somebody on the edge needs to step up. I hope it's AJ Epenesa, but we're already starting to see, whether it's potential on-field impacts, which we really don't know now because we haven't seen guys strap the pads on. We haven't seen competition against other teams and other players, so we don't really know. But the potential Von Miller impact is already being talked about on the field from players. They're talking about the potential one-on-one opportunities and the impact of him being there and seeing double teams. But we're seeing what we talked about, that extra coach piece to Von Miller. We're seeing that real connection. Multiple guys are talking about it. Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, Carlos Basham talked about it. Gregory Rousseau talked about it. Coaches have talked about it. You're seeing all of these players talk about the impact that Von has on them from a preparation standpoint. How to treat your body, how to prepare, how to work, how to practice, how to approach the game, how to look at the game, everything. Like, you're seeing that return on investment already starting to pay dividends for the Buffalo Bills based on what Von Miller is. And I put it out in a tweet last night. I think the parallels are tremendous to how DeMarcus Ware, when he left Dallas to go to Denver, the impact that he had on the Denver Broncos and a young Von Miller. It's funny to see that and know that, and then see where Von Miller is now. He could have a very similar impact on the Buffalo Bills and a young Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham and Ed Oliver, much in the same vein that DeMarcus Ware had on him. So those parallels also aren't lost on Von Miller. He talked about it. He's talked about it multiple times. Him and DeMarcus Ware are still boys. He looks up to DeMarcus Ware. He talked about it during their Super Bowl and playoff runs. He still talks about him now, the impact that DeMarcus Ware had on his game and what it allowed him to do. And he wants to be able to pay it forward to the young guys. And we're starting to see it. I'm excited to see what that holds for them. And yeah, Steven says here, Rousseau is already valuable with his elite run stop ability. And that's not an exaggeration or hyperbole. His run stopping last year, especially for a rookie, considering how green he was and where he finished in stops, stop percentage, run stop win rate, all of that, he was elite versus the run last year. But as I take a drink of water, his pass rushing, still a huge question. Actually, I would say right now, from like a technique and plan perspective, you can make the case that AJ Epinesa is the better pass rusher than Gregory Rousseau. Gregory Rousseau won last year because of length and physicality and some cleanup sack type stuff. But from a pass rush plan and technique standpoint, Epenesa is ahead of Gregory Rousseau. Now, what's cool is, as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, Rousseau was very aware of what he needed to do in his game to take that jump to the next level. So 1, he added about 5 to 7 pounds of muscle this offseason. 2, his focus has been on pass rush moves, plan, counters. Just consistently talked about moves, counters, moves, plan, moves, counter, all that kind of stuff. So his head is in the right place. And again, that we all knew that was the timeline he was working on and what he needed to do to up his game. Physically, he's tremendous. Von Miller even talked about it yesterday. He talked about how, with his length and range, Gregory Rousseau, that is, Von Miller will never be able to rush or play the game like Gregory Rousseau does. Rousseau has a very distinct body type and advantages and disadvantages that come with that body type, but he's got to be able to tie in some of the technical pieces to the game, being really able to play the position of edge rusher as opposed to just being a physical piece. We know the run stopping ability will be there, and hopefully, knock on wood, his run stopping ability doesn't take a dip if his pass rush productivity goes up and he puts more focus and emphasis on that this offseason and in games. But as of right now, I think Rousseau's pass rush productivity and pass rush ability is very much a question mark. If you told me that Basham's the better no, I wouldn't believe that. But I think Epenesa could be ahead of him right now in terms of technique and plan. And that's just, whether you want to take that as a positive for Epenesa or a negative for Rousseau, I think it just speaks to the variability and the questions that you have in all of the edge rushers not named Von Miller. Because again, the best edge rushers on the Bills last year were Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes, and both of those guys are gone. They got replaced. One of them got replaced with a premier player in Von Miller and a bona fide Hall of Famer. So we know what he's going to bring. Again, hopefully, knock on wood, I'm superstitious. You know this. But Rousseau's pass rush productivity and along with the rest of the edge group is very much a question mark. Actually, to put it like this too, if the Bills brought back F.A. Obata, I would have said F.A. Obata was the second best pass rusher on this team after Von Miller, ahead of Rousseau and not ahead of Ed Oliver, but from an edge perspective, ahead of Rousseau, Basham, and Epenesa. That's how much variability and how many questions I have for these young edge rushers and for this edge rushing grouping as a whole after Von Miller. But nonetheless, and that's also too good point here from John. I keep forgetting about Shaq Lawson. Shaq's pass rush productivity, that upside's limited. If he gets you 4 to 5 sacks in a year, cool, awesome. They're probably hustle sacks or stunts and gamesmanship work up front that allows him to get free or him to be able to take advantage of that. But we know what he's going to bring. He's going to be able to set the edge in the run. He's going to bring that physicality, that violence, that energy. Multiple players and coaches have already talked about it thus far in the offseason in terms of what he brings. He is also a known quantity. Again, not from a pass rush productivity standpoint, but from a run stopping ability. But again, nonetheless, you still have a known quality. We don't know what Epenesa is going to be from a run stop or pass rush. We don't know what Basham is going to be from a run stop or pass rush. We know what Lawson is. We know what Gregory Rousseau is, and we know what Von Miller is. So it'll be very interesting. Dad of a Bills fan, this is a good point here. He says one is going into year 3, the other year 2. I would be concerned if AJ wasn't a little ahead in technique. That's fair, but also, again, think of it. And AJ Epenesa talked about this today, as have the coaches at different points. AJ Epenesa got drafted in the midst of the tumultuous COVID offseason. He didn't really get a real NFL season. Then he comes in and they're like, hey, you weigh 280. We want you to drop down to like 260. So he comes in a COVID offseason. Even if there was no COVID offseason, adjusting to NFL talent and adjusting to NFL life on and off the field is hard for any college player, no matter how good they are coming into the league. So that's already hard. You add in a COVID offseason, it makes it even harder. And then on top of it, he has to transform his body and relearn how to rush the passer. He talked about it. He went from being more of a brutish and bullish type of rusher and being more physical and type and violent to having to learn more speed rushes and more technique and more angles, which he would have had to do anyway, let alone having to do that on top of changing your body. I know he's a year ahead of Rousseau and a year ahead of Basham, but having to change his body and having the COVID offseason, I think that stunted his growth and his development in the NFL. So I know this is year 3 for him. Really, it's almost kind of like his first full year coming into the NFL, because last year there was still some weird stuff in the offseason as well with COVID. But this is really like year 2 for him. Almost like year 1.5 to 2.5, depending on how you want to look at it and how much slack you want to give him. Don't discount the COVID offseason for him. And again, the body transformation. He lost a lot of weight that changed everything about the way he played defensive line. So a big change for him, which again, that doesn't give him a pass, but I think it's something you have to factor in when you talk about where he is in his development and where he is with his progression as a player overall. But again, I get your point. I just think you got to factor in that body transformation and COVID piece because it's significant for him. And that's going to do it for us here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. The chat was jumping as, again, I know we're starting to get into the slower parts of the offseason, but I appreciate everybody who rode with me live on this episode. Thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you for all your questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, the engagement with each other, the engagement with myself. I say it every week, like I'm tremendously appreciative of everybody who watches, listens, anything in general, but especially those of you who join me live, especially when I don't have a guest on and I'm riding solo. It's really awesome to have live people here, engaging and, the back and forth and see the chat moving and jumping. So thank you guys very much for joining me live on this episode. If you join me live while you are still here, please, 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 and thank you in advance, drop a like on this video. A like goes a very long way towards helping myself and the entire Cover One team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. It helps with the algorithm to really, kickstart things for the show. So please drop a like if you are still here watching this. If you are watching this later, listening later, whatever have you, thank you very much for your listen, your download, your view. If you're watching on YouTube, again, please drop a like. Please subscribe to Disguise Coverage and the entire Cover One channel. if you see so fit. If you're listening on any of the podcasting apps or platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. Please also subscribe. Again, those things are tremendously helpful towards helping myself to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears and the entire Cover One team. Again, thank you everyone for joining me here on this episode as we start to get into the slow, doldrums of the off season, but got a lot of great content planned for you guys and girls over the next several weeks, leading us into training camp and then leading us into the preseason and then regular season. We're in June. It is right now June 15th. We're about 4 to 5 weeks away from training camp. We're about 7 weeks away from the preseason. And we're only several short months away from the start of regular season 2022 football for the Buffalo Bills. So it'll be coming around the corner fast, but got a couple really fun shows planned for you guys over the next couple of weeks. Again, you guys and girls, got a really fun show planned over the next couple of weeks and some unique content to come your way to get us through the slowness of this offseason before, again, we ramp up with training camp, preseason, and the NFL regular season, and anything and everything you have. If there was something I didn't get to in this episode, because I know there was a lot, I had a lot of content to go through. I know you guys were jumping in the chat. If there's something I did not get to, this isn't just a plug to get you to follow me on Twitter. Go find me on Twitter. I'll take down the thank you guy or the toodles you guys for a minute. That's the Twitter handle at pro__ant, pro2_ANT. At me on Twitter, DM me, whatever have you. If there was anything I didn't answer or there's something you think of later, that's the best way to get a hold of me. TikTok works as well, but Twitter is my primary platform if you want to engage with me or interact and whatever. And I honestly get back to everybody on Twitter 1000%. If you at me, if you comment on something, if you DM, whatever have you, if you got something that you need from me, get at me on Twitter and I'll try to get back to you ASAP. So if there's anything I didn't hit for this episode, get at me on the old Twitter. I appreciate all the kind words that are starting to come in as we wind down on this episode. And again, thank you everybody so much for joining me on this episode. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage and to the Cover One channel as a whole. Drop a like, go get yourself some one pie pizza, all that good stuff. Treat yourself. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe and taking care of one another. Be kind to one another, your family, your friends, anyone and everyone. It's becoming very hard apparently in this world to be kind to one another. So please be kind, good vibes to anyone and everyone. Please tell all your family, friends, and loved ones about Disguise Coverage. Or, as I always like to say, if you thought this episode sucked or this show sucks and you want to try and ruin an enemy's day, tell that enemy about Disguise Coverage. Any press is good press. I appreciate you all very, very much. Thank you for joining me here on this episode and watching. If you need anything, get at me on the old Twitter. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.